so chaotic. One of them looks at me and goes, I was telling them about the fall. Are your pants on backwards? I was like, that has nothing to do with this lesson. What are you talking about? And so just catering to the kids and meeting them where they're at is so important. So with the guys, it was just like learning through experience, hands-on games. But with those girls, I was able to come to them and just explain things. I don't want to say dumb it down because kids aren't dumb. They just don't have the same amount of knowledge as adults do. And that totally makes sense. Like, I'm not going to come to the 2-year-olds and be like, let's talk about God's omnipresence, because, like, they can understand the word water, and that's pretty much it. They know Cheerios really well, but, like, I can't come to them and just say omnipresence, because they just haven't learned that yet. And so, being able to come to the girls and be like, okay, this is what special revelation is, and to just be like, that means that God wrote the Bible, like, he inspired it, and was able to reveal parts of himself. So it's like, when you're revealing, you're coming out of hiding. Like, you're making yourself known, you're making yourself seen. And so just catering to the needs of the kids that you're around, like adults, you have to be able to kind of read your audience. But with kids, you have to get all these main points out super quick and super thoroughly, because they don't have the attention span to just sit and hear the same thing going on and on and on. They just have to hear, like, boom, this is what this is. Boom, this is what this is. And you just kind of got to move fast.
Absolutely. I think when people look at teaching kids, they see it as something where, oh, well, it's just like, I'll just go, I guess, since I'm starting to volunteer, I'll just go teach these kids, it's whatever. But there's a real genuine value for every person in the church to be able to teach a child, because even if they're not teaching children, what you just described is, you're not dumbing it down. They don't have the same spiritual vocabulary, and they don't have the same attention span that someone who's already in a church has. That sounds exactly like evangelism.
Yeah.
Having to use words and translate the gospel message into a language that someone who's not spiritual would understand, and doing it in a very, very short time frame.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, imagine trying to give a whole 40-minute sermon to someone while you're evangelizing and using spiritual language and everything.
Yeah, that wouldn't work out well.
Exactly. So I think you're right on it. There's a real value to this. And even if there wasn't a value for evangelism, there's still kids who need Jesus.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, every Christian should be able to learn those things, and that's definitely something that's difficult to learn. And on that same note of something that every Christian should learn, how have you been able to deal with interpersonal conflict with volunteers, either volunteer to volunteer or volunteer to you?
Thankfully, I'm still pretty new to working at the garden, and so if volunteers really have an issue, they go to our director or our coordinator, but now they're coming more to me. It's more like volunteer and child, or child and child. So a lot of our volunteers are handled by our coordinator, just because she has more experience. She's older than I am. I'm only 20, and so there's like only so much I can do within that respect frame. But I've definitely had to deal with a lot of volunteer child and child and child. And most of it is volunteers who they're so amazing, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm throwing anyone under the bus or like not thankful for the volunteers, because they're such incredible people. But I understand kids, they get on your nerves, they test your patience. It's definitely difficult to work with them sometimes, and especially when you're having a bad day. And a lot of our volunteers are parents, and so for them to come a Sunday morning, they have to get all their kids ready and out the door, which is a whole spiel in and of itself. But it can be really sad to see how they can be super snappy with the kids sometimes. And I mean, I understand. It's super easy to do, and we all have that's in nature still, where it's easy to just not be kind all the time. But just reminding them, like, hey, you're here for a reason, and you're here to love these kids, and God is seeing that, and He is just thankful that you're working. We're thankful that you're working on this. But just remember, like, if you need to, you can step out, like, wave me down, come out, take a deep breath, go get a snack, go get a cup of coffee, go get some water. Like, let's just refresh you before we can bring you back into that classroom area. And a lot of it too is like volunteers who don't have experience with special needs kids, and so they don't know how to accommodate to the kids and their different needs, and so it just stresses them out, and so they just aren't necessarily kind and understanding. And so being able to be like, okay, like, this is what this kid needs right now. I can be that. I'll just let the volunteer take a breath and go tend to the rest of the kids while I focus on this child who needs something different and may have just been hurt by a volunteer.
For sure. I think it was Spurgeon in his book Come Ye Children, where he wrote that a 10-year-old child in the faith and a 50-year-old child in the faith are both still children in the faith.
Yeah.
And like what you're saying about like conflicts where I wish a volunteer was not mean to the child, or I wish the child was not mean to the child. People don't grow up unless they do.
Yeah.
People aren't sanctified unless they are. And so like you learning to handle conflicts between children, when other people look at that, like with the teaching thing, they may say, oh, well, you're just learning to be a babysitter. When really you're learning to dispel conflict that is everywhere. Because a lot of people, I don't want to use the term acting like children, but a lot of people don't learn to deal with those issues until they do.
Exactly. And that, coming out of it, I'm like, oh, not to be offensive, but these adults are acting like 2-year-olds. Like, I'm using the same methods that I use on my 3-year-old kids as I am on these like 53-year-old adults who are amazing and lovely. But that's what we do, is we treat them with love, and we just have to stop inappropriate behaviors, no matter what the age is.
And you're exactly right. And so with the sanctification of a child and an adult who's a new Christian or not really an acting Christian,
Yeah.
Just learning to deal with interpersonal problems and someone not being perfect on this side of eternity is that's very valuable.
For sure. Yeah.
Definitely. So on that value, what are some lessons the Lord has taught you while working there, going through Bible college, doing an internship, being a dorm steward?
Definitely patience, and in the patience and in the waiting, being able to seek Him, because patience does not come from me, and I learned that incredibly quickly. I need to rely on Him fully for that patience, and that was something I learned taking on the Tuesday night task. Basically, with that, I was the person who would set everything up. I would write the curriculum. I would help out, like, get the crafts all set up, and then I would be the one locking up at the end of the night, which was super intimidating as like a very new staff member. But those kids, I don't know. I see them on Sundays. I see them on Wednesdays, and they're angels. I don't know what they had Tuesday nights, but if they could stop doing what they were doing, that would be great. They were monsters. So having patience and just being able to be like, okay, Lord, like, you love these kids, and because you love them, I love them. I don't like them all the time. I tolerate them, but I love them the way that you do, which is this unconditional, like, forgiving love. And so being able to just remember, like, okay, they are not 20, they are not 40. I just have to wait kind of on their terms for them to be able to calm down and be able to listen, and that was definitely within reason. Like, we still used good classroom management, but like, I just had to wait, and that was something that the Lord was teaching me. And that a lot of just compassion, because you don't know what these kids are walking in with. A lot of our Tuesday night kids, like, they're just randomly brought to this place. Like, moms are coming in for the very first time, and a lot of their parents are just newly saved, and so the concept of the gospel and Jesus is so new to them that just having that compassion and being like, okay, I gotta, again, be patient with you and love you, but it's like, what has life been like before this? Because I was brought up in a Christian home, so I never got to experience, and I'm so thankful for it, just like parents who didn't know Jesus. And so I cannot imagine what a child has to endure with parents who don't know Christ, or with only mom knowing who the Lord is, or whatever that family situation looks like. And so just remembering, like, every person has a testimony and every person has a background, and you just have to trust the Lord in that, and you have to meet them where they're at in that moment, and you have to just love them unconditionally, and just know, like, okay, like, you came in and I don't know what happened before this, like, even in the car or on the walk from the sidewalk to inside, like, just being willing to just have that compassion that Jesus had, where he was willing to just wait on people and to just meet them where they're at. I think those are the two, like, biggest things. um, but I mean, there's always been, like, super small, I mean, I'm sure they're not small in the grand scheme of things, but they're just waiting to resurface.
Yeah, and that's definitely a common theme through a lot of uh, all ministries
Mm-hmm.
is you never know where they're coming from.
Exactly.
Yeah, so definitely being aware of that is a really good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are some of the successes that you've been able to benefit from?
Definitely those Tuesday nights, and just being able to talk to girls for like half an hour, 40 minutes about who Jesus was and how we're supposed to live as Christians and what fruits of the Spirit we like want to grow in. Um, Connecting with a child is always, like, it's the sweetest thing and most rewarding thing ever, and especially if that child is a difficult kid. And I'll admit that the kids are, they are difficult sometimes, you know, and you definitely have that one kid in every classroom where you're like, oh, you're here and I love you, but oh boy. And so being able to just be able to connect with them and kind of hear their background, or just be able to love them well. Like, one of my little 2-year-old guys, he would just hide in the house and he would scream at everyone who came into this little playhouse, and it was terrible. And so I would try and get him out, and he'd be hitting me and biting me and all the things that 2-year-olds do. But just realize, like, oh, it's actually your nap time, and like have him fall asleep just in my arms because he's just tired of fighting, being awake and fighting the people around him. Like, it's so sweet. And too, like, one of the girls just like will run up to me and be like, Miss Emma, I love you and I'm so thankful for you. Like, one of our little girls who deals with a lot of anxiety just came up and was like, I love you and I'm so thankful you're here. And just being able to hear, like, you are making an impact on these kids, even though you just constantly feel like you're like nagging them, like, okay, you gotta be quiet, we gotta listen, we gotta do our homework. Like you just kind of feel like you're annoying and kind of burdensome to the kids at times, but it's like they see that you care, and they know that you love them. And so being able to have that connection is, like, it's the sweetest thing ever.
For sure. What about failures? Have there been any failures in ministry where you've been able to grow a lot from those?
I feel like I'm constantly failing in ministry, but it's still new to me, and so I'm just kind of working out, like, oh, that's not how you print the coloring sheets, and I just wasted a ream of paper. That's difficult and expensive. um but even just like learning how to and how not to respond to people, I feel like could be one of the biggest things. Whether that be a 2-year-old where you just kind of are annoyed and you're like, okay, I should have been a lot kinder. Um, it's just random things like that that you just kind of beat yourself up for. Like, I didn't effectively show Jesus to, like, this one person, you know? And it kind of eats away at you, because it's like, my job is to display Jesus to people and to point people to him. And if I'm not doing that effectively, then, like, what's the reason? What's the purpose, you know? And so it's like, you just gotta go home and you gotta check yourself and be in the Word, which is difficult and it's humbling, but you have to be home with the work in ministry, and sometimes it just takes a moment like that to realize it.
Definitely. What is some advice that you'd give yourself or someone else starting completely fresh, no Bible college, no
Mm-hmm.
internship, just going into this church? What's some advice you'd give?
Find someone to disciple you. Definitely make sure you have good Christian fellowship, because for one, we were not made to do things alone. We were made relationally, and that's why we long to have a relationship with Christ and why he's a relational God. But we have to have Christian fellowship, and we have to be able to be discipled. Um, Remain learnable and teachable. You never know everything. So just learning more about childhood development or learning new curriculums or new teaching styles is super great. Um, be patient and practice patience in every aspect of life, whether that be with your spouse, with your own kids, with the kids you come in contact with your friends. Just be willing to be patient and just pray without ceasing. Just like Paul commands us to, we have to just constantly be in prayer. Pray for the kids, pray for the pastor, pray for the parents, pray for yourself. Like, everyone needs prayer.
Yeah. Are there any resources that you have been able to use in ministry that you'd recommend to someone else?
That's difficult. Um, Definitely, if in any way possible, if you can get a hold of Bible college lectures or some of the textbooks, like Bible college is pretty affordable. Like the textbooks they make affordable for these broke college students. Purpose Driven Youth was one that I really enjoyed. The Bible in and of itself um, teaches you all the things you need to know about life and ministry. Appreciated the New Testament the most in this season. Um, let's see what else. Pinterest is your best friend because that's where tons of craps come from. And for us at our church, we use tons of answers in Genesis, and that helps us with our curriculum. That's where our curriculum comes from. But then it's also just a source that we're able to go to in case we don't know one of the irate questions that the kids ask.
Definitely. Is there any resources that you guys like have available to the students, like in the classrooms or?
We have, for elementary school students, we just have the Bible, but we make sure that our elementary school volunteers are knowledgeable and trustworthy because the questions kids have are the greatest things ever. Just because, like, that childlike faith is just so amazing because the Bible, honestly, does not make sense. Like, why was a snake talking in the garden? And everyone, like, all of my kids are like, what in the world, Miss Emma? Snakes do not talk. What does this even mean? Or like, okay, why was Jonah in the belly of a whale? How did the walls of Jericho fall? And so knowing, like having volunteers that are knowledgeable in even just the basic Bible stories, so that way they can point the kids to like, oh, like let's check out what the book of Joshua has to say about that, or let's actually read the story of Jonah. Um, just being able to have volunteers that we trust is a super great resource. For our littler kids, we have these super sweet storybooks, and it's called the My Awesome God Storybook Bible or something like that, where it takes tons of passages in the Bible and makes them all kid friendly, but it also takes like how should we study the Bible? How should we take care of our Bible? Like, is that even important? Like, how should we think about it? And so these Bibles are great, and they've kind of like opened my eyes to different things where it's like, oh, that is an important thing that I like know because I've been studying this for the past 3 years, but it's like, oh, I should bring this up to people because it's something that needs to be taught.
Definitely. So from everything that you've just told me, children's ministry really seems like something that everyone in the church can benefit from because you're learning to contextualize the gospel to people who don't know spiritual language, don't know the Bible stories. You're learning to disciple people and care for people. You're learning to be around people who are children in sanctification. Yeah, so it really sounds like children's ministry is something that everyone in the church can benefit from.
It definitely is, and I would say if you can be around kids and not lose your ever loving mind, try it out at least for 1 month. Like you gotta give it a decent trial run because the things the kids will teach you, but it's like the Lord using the kids to teach you, is the most amazing thing ever. And it grows you and it humbles you incredibly quickly, but it is the most fruitful thing I have ever experienced.
Definitely. Well, Emma, I don't have any more questions. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
I know. Thanks for asking.
All right. Well, thank you very much for doing this interview.
Of course. Thank you.